Forget sex, forget orgasm. Where else can we exercise beautiful taking? Where else can we put our wants forward? Where else can we put our wants first? And understand that it is not a threat to another. Throughout time, we have been applauding the sacrificial woman, right? I am so over this idea that, we are to give and to give and to give. And then the only time we can receive is if we meet somebody who can give at the veracity of our giving.
Welcome to Come Talk with Amy, the podcast where sex isn't whispered about, it's talked about out loud. I'm Amy, your host and intimacy coach, here to spark raw, playful, and unfiltered conversations about relationships, desire, and everything in between. No shame, no scripts, just real talk about what really turns us on. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Come Talk with Amy. We have the amazing Lauren Elise Rogers. Lauren is a certified holistic sexuality educator and an embodied intimacy and relationship coach. She is my dear friend. Welcome, Lauren.
I am so thankful to be here, Amy. This is a long time coming.
Yes. And we love a long time coming. No.
We love
We're
coming. Maybe not when it's a long time, but yes. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so glad to be in this container with you and not bumping into you on the streets of New York. This is fun.
I know.
Although that was
pretty amazing,
that
too.
was pretty amazing. In the city of millions, for you and I just to run into each other was so kismet and beautiful.
Yes, in Midtown, like on your way to a Broadway show.
Insane.
Yeah, amazing.
Beautiful. Beautiful. As it should happen. As it should.
As it should happen. And Lauren, you and I know each other from the Embodied Lab, where we both got our certification from.
Yes.
And I was thinking about this too, like our first encounter, I believe it was like the first day or the first weekend of the Embodied Lab. I know it was my first, like you do group work and practices, right?
Yes.
So you were like my first practice client. And at that point, I had followed you, was already following you, but didn't realize it when we were on the video together. I was like, she looks kind of familiar, but not putting two and two together. And I was so like, WTF, like, what am I doing? And you were like, you were you and beautiful and just like taking everything in. And I was like, oh my God, like this is the best client ever. Like,
I distinctly remember this too, because you were a beautiful coach. And then I think we had such a beautiful little experience in our little, I want to say it was a triad, right? That there was somebody witnessing, somebody coaching, somebody being the client. And for those listening who may not be familiar, this is very common in a educational space to do triadic work. And so Amy was doing an expert job of coaching me. We were always encouraged to put something real forward into these spaces. And then I think our little triad had such a juicy experience. We were sharing, I want to say like Instagram handles. And I think that's when you said, oh my goodness, no, I already follow you. I know you. And it's just so beautiful when those kind of parasocial worlds interact with the real. And then, yes, to get to spend in human time. And now this just feels full circle and beautiful. I'm so thankful for your work in the world.
Full circle. So full circle. So yes, I love our encounter, that first encounter and every encounter since. And in getting to know you and your story, there are so many parallels, right? In our own unique journeys and so many like juicy and stretching and painful like overlaps. I would love to know, Lauren, before we dive in, what is making you wet and wild lately?
Love this question, especially as we're coming out of snowy, cold months here on the East Coast in the United States. As everything's thawing out, I feel like I'm thawing out too. Complete moment of transparency, maybe TMI for your audience, but I am 40. And so in this luscious space, we like to call perimenopause. And so I think something that is really like turning me on and making me wet and mild is my partner's curiosity and support of my body as I change and become. And I just skipped my first menstrual cycle, skipped my first period in this perimenopausal state, which is very normal for all of us. But it has thrown me for a loop. I am a super regular menstrual being, and my partner is just caught in stride with it. And there's something so sexy about being seen in the aging and transformation process. I very much think that women as they age are incredibly sexy. And so to be seen in this light and witnessed and celebrated, and it's just been really making me wet and wild for sure. Hmm.
Hello. That
Hmm.
is so fucking hot.
Yep.
And may the hot flashes hold off for a while. No. But
Welcoming them when they come. I think we're a little ways off from that, but the abnormal cycles have begun.
yes, and I am a little older than you, and so I remember when my first one I've only missed, like, 1 or 2, like, for, like, up to
Hmm.
10 years
Yes.
goes out of whack. All of a
Yes.
sudden, there's heavy flows, flows that are, like, shorter, longer, distant, like, it is
Yes.
all over the place. It is a wild ride. I agree, like, as women age and step into their
Mm.
wisdom and their confidence, and it's just so fucking beautiful.
It really is stunning. And I think it is necessary for this world to heal, that we continue to celebrate the body as it moves in and through all of its various stages. And so, yeah, it starts with our own personal responsibility. I deeply believe that we defy this ageist culture that we're in, but then to have partner support, turn on every time.
Yes, and I am so in love with your love, and you guys have your own podcast, the
Yes.
Partnership Podcast,
Yes.
yes?
Yes. 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 Yes.
So definitely people at home, check it out. We will have it linked in the show notes. And Lauren and her husband take us on their journey and so relatable. Yeah, so I love your love so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. Talk about a big old story, which I think we'll get into some of it today. And it is a hard fought love. It is a love that I had to work for. So it's a beautiful story. It really is.
Yes, exactly. And such like a fabulous segue into today's topic. I want to do things a little bit different today. So you posted a post in January. I believe it was January 21st. I have Instagram up because I am going to read that post.
Mm.
Yeah, it was January 21st. And there was a trend at the beginning of the year where people were posting 2016, right? And
Hmm.
like, this is, my 2016 self and my 2026 self, right?
Yes.
A 10-year reflection, which, like, wasn't 2016 2 years ago, but
Right. I mean, when everyone started the year off going 2026 is the new 2016, and it was a lot of like much younger people saying this. So I was like, this is really funny. But I thought, what was my 2016? So yeah, this post was a wild experience for me to even gather and put together. And I was so glad that you brought it up as something you wanted to read. So please go ahead. Yeah.
yes. And you're like just so eloquent in words. I'm going to read. So in the post, you have kind of a carousel style where you have on the carousel, the pictures, you have different words and talking about your journey. And then you have the caption.
Yeah.
I'm going to read the second slide and then I'm going to read the caption. Okay. So the second slide says she'd been married for 9 years and had a 6-year-old daughter. She was running a nonprofit, and on the outside, she looked, in quotation marks, happy. Inside, she was carrying unimaginable pain. Okay, so I'm going to move to the caption. Your caption says 2016 didn't look dramatic from the outside. There was no announcement, no leaving, no rupture, just a girl quietly gathering herself. This was the year of micro awakenings. The year my nervous system started noticing what felt alive and what felt dead. The year I tasted agency before I knew what to do with it. The year I learned that wanting wasn't dangerous, it was informative. In the stages of change, 2016 wasn't action, it was contemplation and preparation. It was my body learning the truth before my mind could tolerate it. So when everything did explode at the end of 2017, when I finally asked my husband to move out, it wasn't sudden. It was preceded by 1,000 quiet moments of becoming. I'm like getting chills. I'm like gonna cry. I couldn't have survived the rupture without the year before. And I couldn't be who I am now, a sexuality educator and relationship coach who is deeply alive and thriving without honoring that invisible season. If you're in a year that feels confusing, restrained, or not enough, please know this. Nothing is wasted. The roots are growing. The year before matters. That is so, so powerful.
Thank you. I know we have, yeah, achingly similar stories and pieces of our stories. And yet, when I hear that, it's always such a powerful practice. I encourage anyone listening and watching to have someone read back something to them that they've written, because it's wild to hear it spoken, right? Those thoughts are mine, those words are mine. And yet, to hear someone else say it is oddly eerie. 2016, yes, to the outside, didn't really look like much, but to the inside was definitely the season. In education, we often lean into these stages of change, which include pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. And I don't think that the pre-contemplation and contemplation stage get enough credit. I think that they are
Yes.
incredibly necessary to any form of change, whether it is you are looking at a new sexual practice that you want to get into, or you're looking to hit the blow up your life button like I did. Both of them have this quiet beginning of consideration. And 2016 was a year where, yes, I was a parent. I had an incredible child, and yet I had lost me when I began to do professional theater contracts again, and when I began to expand my community supports outside of the small religious spaces that they had existed in for a decade. And it was just really wild how I began to see myself again, and I began to contemplate for the very first time, as I said there, that, oh, perhaps the things that I wanted weren't wrong. I had so been conditioned and indoctrinated to believe that I was to make myself smaller in order to fit into the system that supported men and upheld men, and it had practically suffocated me. And 2016 was really important.
Yeah, and that's why I thought it would be so good. And you're like, I mean, obviously, these are your words and your experience, but to bring this today to the Come Talk with Amy audience to talk about what you call so beautifully the invisible season that often doesn't get a lot of light shed on it. So, if we can, I would love to have you touch on that quiet pain. What did that look like for you?
You know, it's really interesting because now I get to sit with a lot of people in the work that I do with individuals and partnerships. And I hear of this space, and it's usually often before someone has come to me, but I will hear of this invisible season often. And for me, it was full of the space, which some of us have known it as spiritually bypassing or bliss bypassing. And so for a while, I had been using my spiritual practices, and I was raised in high control religion. I was raised in the Presbyterian church, and I would get up at the crack of dawn and I would pour this pain that no one else was seeing onto my journal pages. And thank God I was, my friends, because it is the only space of which I wrote of my abuse. So my precious ex-husband, who, spoiler alert for the audience, is now happily gay. So we were married for a decade and he is now living his best gay life, and we are dear co-parents and friends. But in this season, he was denying his homosexuality and had been raised in the fire and brimstone Southern Baptist Church, where he was literally going to burn in hell if that was ever something he considered. And it was deeply, deeply repressed. This is not something that he knew about himself. There is countless research on this exact idea. It wasn't that he was out sleeping with men. No, he literally didn't even know this about himself. But he was also dealing with incredible anxiety and depression that was leading to alcoholic behavior. He'd been an alcoholic for years and years. And then when he got sober from alcoholism, it was replaced by these things called parasomnias. For those who might not be familiar, I'll give a brief explanation. If you've ever watched, it was a Netflix show called Alias Grace. The character in the show murders people under the influence of parasomnias. It is like sleepwalking. Your eyes are wide open, but you're a different personality. My ex-husband had 3 different personalities that would come out every few nights. One was this little toddler. He would like tiptoe around the house giggling. A second was kind of this like apathetic teen, this type of attitude. And the third was kind of like a raging alcoholic type of behavior. This happened
Oh.
for 7 years, and
And
I
at the
told no
time,
one. Yeah.
yeah, at the time, Did you know, like, you have a name for it now,
Oh,
right?
I had no idea. There were people that I would try to explain some of this to, and they would just cough it off as spiritual warfare. There were people who thought I was making the whole thing up because he couldn't remember any of this the next day. And so in 2016, I was, as I said before, getting up at the crack of dawn and before my daughter would awake, and I would sit down with my journal and my coffee and I would pray. I would put everything down on the page and I would use this form of spiritual bypassing. Again, I have these terms now, my friends, but this is why Amy wanted to bring it up, is I didn't know any of this. I didn't know that I was using this prayer practice to silence my truth, to silence what was really going on. I thought I was being an obedient wife. And so I would put all of this horror down on the page. I would talk about how sad this was, but then I would use the spiritual faith practice, these biblical texts to pair myself. And I would say, well, but if Jesus loves me and I'm such a quote unquote sinner, then I need to stay by the side of this person. And there were countless books that I had been given as a young Christian woman on the sins of your husband are not to be discussed with anyone else. And so some might know that this character, Doug Wilson, is making it in the news a lot recently. And he was the direct influence on my life growing up, on how I had been introduced to romance and marriage. And I truly thought that this was not to be shared with anyone. And I had, up until this point, even done things like lay my love for things like the performing arts before the Lord, kind of like letting them go and
Yeah.
understanding my position, I deeply believed was to be submissive to this husband. And that included not telling anyone what was actually going on in my world. And no, I had no term for this parasomnia. I would beg him and beg him to get help, and he would refuse. He was a hypochondriac and didn't want to tell anyone what was going on in his personal life. And I thought that I had to remain silent.
Yes. Damn. There are so many elements in what you just shared. And that staying quiet
Yes.
and obedient, right? It's like being obedient, submissive. Like
Yes.
that is the good girl thing to
Yes.
do.
Yes.
That is the holy thing
Hmm.
to do. That's a
Yes.
sacred thing to do. And nobody is talking about like what it's doing to our insides, right? What
Mm-mm.
it's doing to our sense of self.
Yes. So it's why, again, I think 2016 was so beautiful because accidentally I had gotten back in touch with one of my best friends in Manhattan who was a Broadway actor and now does hair and wig design on Broadway. And he and I had he had come to town. He was in theater with me when I was a little person. And I was really saying, like, why aren't you still performing? And I said, well, I don't have space. And he was like, yes, you do. Yes, you do. And so a local professional company was auditioning, holding auditions. And he, this wonderful, dear gay friend of mine, was like, I really think you should go out for this. Like, I really think you should submit. I think you should go audition, even just for you. Like, just go do it.
Yes. We love
And
that friend.
yes, it was so important. And he is such a crucial part of this story because it was small, right? It was this pre-contemplation piece. It was this piece of self-worth that you just so beautifully named. It was this identity moment of this is something that would be just for me. And I booked that role and I then had to secure childcare, which anyone out there who knows, who bears the primary burden of providing care for a child in your home, that's a lot of work.
A
My
lot of work.
husband's career came first. There was no support from him. I was securing childcare. He is a high-end wedding photographer, so he was gone on all the weekends that I was performing. So I didn't, the money that I was making from this contract was directly going back into childcare. It's expensive. It should be. And yeah, it was the beginning of remembering my worth and value outside of the role I played to my daughter and to my husband. And it was so transformational, just these baby steps, right? Like the first seeds planted of not only do you have worth and value outside of this role, you also have an ability to extend your community. And it's interesting because then fast forward into, my certification for holistic sexuality education and embodied intimacy and relationship coaching. We would talk often about the places at which we are able to change, right? And community supports is one of the most necessary things for people to change their relational dynamics. And so when we have an individual whose only community is inside of their church or their family, it becomes very hard for them to even imagine a world outside outside of this relationship, because there's the threat of losing more than the connection to their spouse. There's the threat of losing the connection to everyone around them. And so what I
Yes.
didn't at all know at the time is this was also sharpening my skills of making new friends and understanding
Huge.
that there might be someone else there to catch me if I left everything that I knew, which if you fast forward, it was good foreshadowing because I did. I lost it all in the upcoming years. But yeah, fascinating. No, I had none of these terms in 2016.
Yeah. That's so important, that piece of returning to yourself, right?
Yes.
And especially like you and I both have that purity culture background and that influence, right? And how we chose to, or like how we knew to get in relation, right? Is that we
Yes.
do sacrifice and give up and we become one with our husband or wife.
Yes.
And then it is all about them, right? And
Yes.
especially as a female, like we're there to support their success and to be in the home and to then be there for the children. Like, where is our individuality? And so it's so common, I think, for people that grew up in purity culture, but then
Yes.
also like women too,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Right. Gender roles,
Society is.
regardless of whether
Mhm.
you were raised inside of like religious orthodoxy or whether you were raised simply in the United States of America. No, it's interesting because now I have clients all over the world. So I have clients in Egypt and in India, and they will often share with me similar cultural scripts that were handed to them, even though our religions of origin are different.
Right.
And, you know, I'll even talk to someone who wasn't raised religiously, but the societal scripts that were given or media about the gendered roles that we're all to
Yes.
play run deep. They run real deep. And yeah, patriarchy and misogyny is in most of us, even inside of female bodied people and non binary people. It's one of, I think, our greatest gifts is to work on that, of uprooting these sources of misogyny that lie in each of us because of, again, societal scripts. And it
Yes.
started there, and I didn't know it again, but it was really allowing me to say, wait a second. Yeah, these wants of mine, they challenge people who would rather me stay in service to them. Yeah. Okay. But then there were also folks who were coming forward in that season. It was the first glimpse that I got of people celebrating me standing in my fullest self. And I think that was really transformational too, is to go, wait a second. I'm noticing two things. One, yes, I am irritating some people who I am no longer as available to because now I have rehearsal and now I have a show and now I
Yes.
have these things, clocking that. Number two, I am clocking that there's a second group of humans who are so elated that I am using these things again, that I'm getting to do this, that they can come support in this way. And I was clocking that too of, these two things are not alike. Again, totally pre-contemplation, but boy, did it come in handy down the line.
So huge. And like you said, that sense of community too. And
Yes.
also like building outside of your already tight container.
Yes.
Damn, that is so huge. Reopening and accessing pleasure and joy. How do we access that? Like you've mentioned a little bit about how do you help your clients and others access this
Yeah.
when they're not there yet?
Yeah, in small ways. And it's so interesting because I identify with this idea, this archetype of Chiron, like the wounded healer. And I think that so often the healing work I get to do with clients, whether I want to admit it or not, has origins in, oh, I did these same things. I didn't know I was doing it, but I did these same things. And so, yes, this prioritization of one's own desires, learning that our desires are not an obligation for somebody else to meet. And so I think when I understood that this victim narrative that I was living inside of, this idea that, right, everyone else comes before me and I am a martyr, I am a mother who sacrifices. Once I understood that, wait a second, there were elements of my happiness that were my responsibility, the world
Yes.
started to brighten. Right. And when in our spaces, your audience is most familiar, pleasure is so much more than the orgasmic experience. Pleasure is the way something feels on my skin. Pleasure is the sun hitting my face. Pleasure is the feeling I get when I do a Broadway dance, right? Pleasure is
Yes.
laughter late into the evening with new friends. Pleasure is curiosity. Pleasure is hard work. Pleasure is laughter. And so in these seasons with a client, when they find their way to me, maybe because they've never had an orgasm with a partner, right? Or maybe they've never had an orgasm on their own. Maybe they have lived inside of a world that never gave them permission to do so. We will work
Yes, it
on
was me.
this permission piece for self. We will work on finding things that we delight in. We will look at the difference between love, which means to have, and desire, which means to want. And we will look at the beliefs we have about quote unquote women who want. And so many of these stories that we have been given throughout the ages show that women who want, it leads to destruction. And I think I truly believed that. And I had friends in that group, that first group, who would say things like, you are neglecting your husband's needs, you're neglecting your friends, right? This is going to lead to a slippery slope of, you ending in sin. It was a straight
Right.
shot for so many that my selfishness was going to be a threat to others. And so with my clients now, I have modalities such as Dr. Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent, where we sit in the fact that it is good to serve. It is beautiful to serve. And yet the truest gift of service starts and originates with the one who is asking for the service. Will you request? Will you do this for me? And then the giver taking a hot second to pause and consider their own limits. Betty Martin is famous for saying limits first, then joy, then generosity.
Yes.
Limits first, then joy, then generosity. So there's that serve, accept dynamic that's beautiful, but there is also the dynamic of taking and allowing. And I think so many of us are familiar with taking being violation, taking being assault, bad things, having our time taken from us, right? And yet, there is a world in which we are taking consensually, the world in which we are doing something, and the person who's benefiting is us. And it is a
Yes.
beautiful, beautiful space when we say, may I? And someone else says, yes, you may. And so what I was learning in that season, even though I didn't know it, was how to stand beautifully in taking, how to quote unquote take responsibility for my pleasure. And so what I would start with a client in this pre-contemplation stage is forget sex, forget orgasm. Where else can we exercise beautiful taking? Where else can we put our wants forward? Where else can we put our wants first? And understand that it is not a threat to another. And communities might need to change, what friendships might need to change, where might you need these supports around you that applaud you? Because throughout time, we
Yes.
have been celebrating women as martyrs. Throughout time, we have been applauding the sacrificial woman, right? How many eulogies are written where it's like, oh, Lauren, the selfless soul, right? It is said out loud at
Right.
so many memorial services, and I am over it. I want, oh, Lauren, right? She lived well. Oh,
Yes.
Lauren, she celebrated her own pleasure and the pleasure of others. Oh,
Yes.
Lauren, right? She nurtured her own garden and welcomed individuals to come and enjoy its bounty. I am so over this idea that, we are to give and to give and to give. And then the only time we can receive is if we meet somebody who can give at the veracity of our giving.
Right.
And sure, maybe some people are out there and that's fine. But I really believe we have a personal responsibility for our pleasure. And that's where I would start with a client is, okay, where do we need to ensure that you are meeting your own needs, wants, and desires aside from what you're asking another to do? Where can we get more tooled up in consensual taking?
Yes. All of the amens and hallelujahs.
Amen.
Hello.
Yes. My clients now jokingly go, this is the Lord's work, Lauren. And I say, yes,
Yes, it
this
is.
is the Lord's work. May she be blessed. Yes.
Amen. Amen. And a woman, I like to say,
Yes.
and a they. For my journey too, like that moment when I realized that I had a say,
Mm-hmm.
that I understood my agency in the
Yes.
situation. But yeah, the moment that I understood and recognized my agency, and I was like, wait, I can do something here. Now it sounds so simple. At the time, no, because I have now accessed it, right? I have practiced. I have done a lot of work to get here.
Yes.
But at the time, I felt very powerless
Yes.
in my breaking. And then it is like that breaking open and really being able to understand and take the reins for your life is like so fucking fabulous.
Yes.
Not easy. It is not an easy road, but it is a freeing road. It is a
Yes.
liberating road. It is like a breath of fucking fresh air. And you've hit on this quite a bit, like that community, like you're in the transforming, you are gaining community, you're also losing community. And that is painful in a lot of ways and also so necessary for your
Mhm.
growth.
Yeah, I think one of the things that anybody who goes through a season of change comes to find out is, yeah, it's not going to please everybody. It's really not. We are going to lose people through the experience. And one of the things that I'll work on with a client after they've maybe hit a blow up your life button is what are the ways in which we contributed to the perceptions of us that others did have for a really long time, right? In what ways
Yes.
in which had I played into the narrative? Had I silenced my voice? And can I take accountability for that so that I make sure not to perpetuate the same patterns again, right? That is our
Yes.
work that we get to do. I often say that if I could have, which is, there's no shame in this, but acknowledge the beauty of my wants, the goodness in my wanting far earlier in my marriage, my husband could be off living his best gay life much earlier, much
Right?
earlier, right? And yet, when I then separated a year later in 2017, and then when we did end up officially divorced in 2019, he was not happy. This was not, oh, wonderful, you've set me free to live my wonderful life. No, 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 no. I was accused of everything. I was made to do psychological evaluations. I was accused of being a complete liar, that I had made all of this up. He told that I was gone rogue, that I was bipolar, that people were calling me a slut and a whore. I mean, it was a lot. It was not just
Yes.
some fantastic beginning. No, 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 no. It was years later that he was able to turn around and see and say to my face, which was beautiful, you saved my life, right? That uncomfortable thing that you did was the very thing that set me free. And so I love to work with my clients in this process of change because we need support. Had it not been for my therapeutic team and the yoga teachers and the community supports and the whole entire holistic support around me, I am not sure I could have done it because it was incredibly hard and upset many people. And I did lose the majority of my community. Funnily enough, the people who held
Right.
tightest to me were my gay bestie in Manhattan, who'd been the very first one. He was kind of my refuge. I would run away to his place and when things got too rough. And then, yes, my very wonderful theater friends that I had made during that season, interestingly enough, became the people who held me when the things were darkest.
That's amazing. That's so beautiful. So can you take us there on blowing things up? What did that look like? The good, the bad, the ugly, the liberating, all of it.
Yeah. So this is another part of the amazing community aspect. And I want to speak to anyone out there who might have super strong intuition. So I had this board member at the time, as you read, I was directing a nonprofit, and she kept sending me these texts and saying, "Are you okay?" And I always thought she was referencing the nonprofit, different things that we were working on. And I'd be like, yeah, this is a lot. Scala that we're throwing, this that we're doing. And she'd go, no, no, no. I mean, personally, I keep having dreams about you. And I was like, what? Right. Again, please
Wow,
remember,
that's
up until this
wild.
point,
Someone at work.
I had never told anyone anything. So finally, she said, could we go on a walk? I had another nightmare about you. I was like, okay. So we went to this certain walking trail in my town in Virginia, and we started walking, and she started asking questions, and we didn't get very far when she sat me down on a bench and was like, what is going on? And for some reason, Amy, this person felt safe enough for my nervous system for me to pour everything out, everything. Every piece of the
Wow.
story, I started pouring out to her. It was the first person I had told of the deep, deep darkness that I was living in night after night after night, the ways in which I was terrified for my daughter's experiences and what was going to happen if, she was awake for one of these, all these terrifying things. And this human says to me immediately, we need to get you into therapy. And I said, oh, well, you can't do that. My husband will say I'm tattletaling on him. And she said, that's even more of a reason to get you into therapy. And I
Right.
said, okay, yeah, no, I can hear that. So hilariously, ironically, another one of our board members was the owner of a therapy practice. I mean, I was in these communities. And this is why I think also people do not change is fear of embarrassment. What does this say about us? If we are with an abuser, what does this say about us? If we have chosen to remain in something. And so if that's you out there, I see you. This was so much of my fear. And, what will this say also if I do something like separation? What will the nonprofit, I'm sitting here leading a nonprofit. I should be above reproach, this type of bullshit that we all believe. And so got into therapy like 2 days later. And this beautiful therapist, oh my God, her jaw kept hitting the floor. It's like telling her the story. And she's like, 7 years? This has been happening for 7 years.
Mhm.
And so I said yes. And she did such a good job. She was like, okay, right? Trying to be really light. She's like, how about we make up
Okay.
3 boundaries? And if he can follow through on these boundaries for a week, grand. How about if he doesn't, we move you and your daughter out of the house? Like she had to be
I
freaking
love
out.
that.
I still am like, wow, what professionalism. This human being held it together because she did not dysregulate me. She just gave me a few tangibles. How about these things, Lauren? And so again,
That's so
this is
huge. Like,
2017. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
yes.
go ahead.
No,
Yeah.
sorry. I was just going to say, like, that's so huge because, damn, I am so many parallels as far as that first conversation and really pouring out, like, this is what I've been experiencing and telling someone that. And then, like, the therapist that is, yeah, holding it together and gently and very professionally giving some options. Not all therapists are going to be like that.
No.
And that could really scare somebody away and shut somebody down in the situation. So those are two huge key elements.
Huge.
Sorry, I just wanted to
No,
point that out.
huge. I think in that first session, she had the grounded, beautiful ability to look me deep in the eyes and say, why are you choosing to stay? And I swear to God, Amy, no one had ever asked me that. And I said,
Wow.
choice? I don't have a choice. I chose to get married. Like,
That part.
divorce is not an option. What do you mean choosing? And she looked at me again and she said, Lauren, you are making a choice. You are choosing to stay. And God bless this human. I mean, this is session number 1. For those not familiar, usually with the therapist, this is like the getting to know you session. She just straight shot, why are you choosing to stay? And I did not know I had a choice. I didn't. I
Yes.
thought I had made that choice and that this was mine to bear and that this was given to me so that I could suffer and become more like Christ. I mean, there is a bunch of incredibly toxic rhetoric that was given to me from a very young age that had truly convinced me that I did not have a choice. So she gave me those 3 boundaries and he was not able to follow through any of them. So the next week when I came in, I said, this is what happened. And she said, great. I mean, at this point, remember, I was deep in evangelical Christianity. So she was like, let's get your little church team involved. And they all came over. It was like very intervention-esque. And they removed my then husband from our home. And I thought that this would just be a season of separation. And I deeply believed, my friends, deeply believed that he would then start to do his work. I was like, great, he'll get into therapy. I'll be into therapy. We'll work
Mhm.
on this. We'll get back together. Reconciliation is preached all through the church. But he did nothing. He did nothing. He just went deep, deep, deep down into the depths. And now we know, sweet guy, right? This is not the relationship of his dreams. So he did nothing. It got worse and worse and worse. He ended up kicking me out of the home that we owned, and I had no money. The nonprofit that I was working for, I got paid $500 a month. And so the
Wow.
dear people in town owned an Airbnb that was empty, so they let it become a long-term rental for me. The nonprofit that I was working for was able to up my salary to, I think, $1,000 a month, which anywhere, this is, even if I'm in Central Virginia, that's still not a lot to feed a child on, to pay rent, pay all your utilities. But yeah, I moved into a basement apartment as I continued to press into separation and continued to hold my then husband's feet to the fire and say, no, 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 this must be worked on. I'm not just reconciling with you if you're not showing me the steps to repair that you're taking, showing me what you are doing to work on yourself. No, as I continued to say, hold my line and say, no, these are my clear requirements for moving into relationship together. Even things like, joint therapy that he continued to refuse. Yeah, I continued to say no, which continued to lose me friends and community. So then a year went by and I told the church that I wanted to file for divorce. The church I was in said, no, we do not grant
Wow.
you grounds for divorce. And I had
What?
done everything their way. I am so not kidding. And they sent me a position paper on marriage and divorce. Guys, it's so
Oh my God.
Presbyterian. It was like some theological paper that had been written in 1998. It had not been updated with trauma informed guidelines. It was archaic and it had the word failure in it. 14 times I
No.
counted. If a human fails, the sacrament of marriage fails, fails, fails. These are all of the things they must be removed from the church. They're not fit to get married again. Blah, 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 blah. They sent me this and said, we will not give you consent. We will not bless your request for divorce. And up until then, I need everybody to know, I had been this white, straight passing girly playing by all their rules. I really thought that since I had done everything they asked of me, that they would have my back. And it was in this moment, I am forever thankful for this moment, that I saw, this is never going to be okay. And this is most likely what has happened to people who are non-heteronormative, people
Mm-hmm.
who do not abide by these experiences. And so I had even sent an email to my counselor about something and, had kind of spoken well of them and said, the meeting about divorce went well. And I had CC'd in the pastors. And I got a call from a pastor's wife that said, you cannot talk about what we're doing here, because if word got out in this community
No
that we're supporting
way.
you in this way, people would say that, blah, 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 blah. And it was like these shackles just were falling off my eyes of, oh, you don't actually give a flying fuck about me. You want to
Disconnection.
protect the reputation of the church. And the reason I can't get divorced is that I would be contributing to one of your statistics. And so I think that was the last day I set foot in that building and
Wow.
stepped away and had to do a lot of then work on, oh my gosh, who have I been harming as well by association, right? How have I been, in essence, wearing a hat or a uniform of a system that has been perpetuating harm against human beings for centuries? And boy, was that sobering in a really, really good way. But yeah,
Yes.
so lost the church, lost my house, lost then my entire community. There were people who just never spoke to me again. It was so funny. Like,
Mm-hmm.
never checked in, never were like, hey, haven't seen you in a while. Nope, just gone, just gone. And
So
so,
familiar. And like, there is so much grief to be had in those shackles falling off.
oh gosh.
Sobering, just so much grief to realize you've put all of this effort and faith and energy into this state of being, right? And becoming and relationships.
Yes.
And then there's just
Yes.
so much grief that comes along with that that I think also doesn't get talked about very
No,
much,
no,
but
I
is
think
very deeply felt.
so glad you're bringing this up. Two things come to mind. One, it was in that time that I really learned about conditional belonging and that there are many systems of
Oh,
belonging out there in the world wherein belonging is conditional upon believing and behaving certain things. And I was
yes.
like, yes, okay, that's the type of belonging that I had been a part of. That as long as I believed and behaved, we were good to go. And it was beautiful that I got to learn this in a very heart-wrenching way, because I think that that is happening all around the world, right? You even see this in yogic communities. You see this in random other places wherein, again, your belonging is conditioned upon believing and behaving. And that's scary shit, guys. It's really scary and beautiful for us kind of always to be holding up a magnifying glass to say, wait, is this conditional belonging like this?
Yes.
And then I also went on to learn much later that Jack Moran, the one who has written this wonderful book called The Erotic Mind, talks about these stages of sexual healing. And it was really neat to read these and go, oh my goodness, these are so reminiscent to the stages of healing that folks like you and I went through, wherein, you clarify your goals and motivations. Great, right? You kind of really start to get your community supports together. You start navigating what he calls the gray zone, which is really important, right? And we're not yet to where we're going, but we're definitely not where we were. It's very disorienting. It's like all of the roads are the same, but the street names are all different. Like it's
Yes,
wild out there.
absolutely.
And yet, step 4 is to mourn your losses. And another author who I love talks about the season of decathexis, right? It is starting to really understand and mourn what we have lost. And when you have spent decades pouring into people, into relationships and systems and upholding sets of beliefs that you thought were true, it is devastating. It is loss upon loss upon loss. It was in the season that I learned about, sure, there's the primary loss. So that was the loss of my marriage, sure. But then there's secondary loss and tertiary loss. And it goes on and on. And oh my goodness. No, it's a season of mourning. And it is full of grief. And I do not think it should be rushed. I think it is sacred and lonely and oh, so hard. So hard. I'm so glad you brought that forward.
Yeah, and all of the feeling all of that is so important.
Yes.
Allowing yourself to feel, you talked about that journaling early on, like such a powerful tool, talking to people, building that expansive community
Yes.
that is not conditional,
No.
which is so huge, and allowing yourself to put up those boundaries and leave behind those that are conditional and maybe some of your closest relationships at the time.
Yes, it really
Mhm.
was. There was a group of friends that I was a part of that they're still a group of friends I am no longer a part of. And it's hard in your mid to late 30s, is how old I was, right? It was starting over from scratch and beautiful. It was really beautiful. The few that
Yes.
did remain who had seen me in that and through that and are still by my side. And yeah, there were new friendships that were yet to be born. And it was juicy and wonderful when those came about. But yeah, I love that it is necessary. It is beautiful. And I think that mourning, is so equivalent to, for instance, a bleed that comes with our menstrual cycle, this kind of shedding of the old and welcoming the new. And I think going through something like that really does give one a perspective for the rest of your life on, okay, I'm most likely going to have to grieve other things. And that's not bad. It's setting things up for the new things that are coming. I don't think it gets talked about enough. And I think that's because that's not the fun part, right? We want to skip to the good part.
Exactly.
There was that song, there was a trend for the longest time of, yeah, we want to talk about how Lauren and Amy are now working in sexuality and it's so exciting and they're empowering. And I'm like, it was the reason that I could do this work is because of the work I put in. I have a client and actually saw her today, but she's famous for saying, Lauren, if you can do this, I can do this. And
I love it.
it's beautiful because she's right. She's truly right that it is an inspiration. And I say this to many of my clients who are in their deconstruction phase and dismantling and blowing up their lives, that people are watching. There's research
Yeah.
done that women who get divorced, often friends within their circle will then go on to get divorced because we are inspiring one another. And I don't view it in a catastrophic way. I view it in a very empowering way that, yeah, you are
Yes.
an
Yeah.
inspiration, my friend. We did it. We did these
We
really
did
hard things.
it.
Yes.
And so let's talk about that becoming deeply alive and thriving. Like, what has that journey looked like for you, for clients? Like, you mentioned you and I have both gone from being in this purity culture to now we're like sexually thriving beings and educators.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
I
So
often
let's talk
say
about that part of the journey.
yes, from purity culture to pleasure preacher is sometimes what I call it. Like,
Yes.
yes, like we are in the space of helping others be truly equipped and empowered and this ownership of their own bodies and agency and pleasure. So, yeah, it is a fun story and it's wrapped into my love story. I'll tell a little bit of mine and then how that kind of parallels the work I do with clients now. So, after my divorce was final, I had my, oh, so juicy slut era is what I call it, that it was just so fun. And yet
Well,
I reside primarily in a town in Central Virginia because that's where my daughter's father is. And I have lived here my entire life, friends, my entire life. So the dating pool here, as one can imagine, is not very large. We do have many professional theaters, as I referenced earlier. So we do have kind of like traveling actors coming through. And so that was like a main source of my
oh,
sexual pleasure.
wow.
So that was nice. Like these kind of like traveling artists. And yet I knew that that's probably not where I was going to like meet my next soulmate or something, right? Like these were people who are on the road. I have to be planted. I have a child. And so instead of moving into this like depressed state of, like, how am I ever going to find a person? I started this journaling practice at my little bar, my little local neighborhood dive, where I started writing these hilarious Lonely Hearts Club ads, right? So like eligible divorcee with a 9-year-old seeks, strapping man who's looking
Yes.
for, right? Blah, blah, blah. And I would just go on and on with these hilarious want ads as a practice of believing that the impossible was possible. And saying,
Yes.
you know what, call me crazy. I think that I have now been through the hardest thing I'm ever going to go through. I also had a mom die when I was 21, right? Like shit's been hard. I think that good things could happen. So let me start doing this. And so this crazy journaling practice was also corresponding with my nonprofit getting acquired during the downfall of my life. Like miracles were happening all around me. It was super cool. And once my nonprofit got acquired and I was getting paid a luscious salary, this nonprofit also started flying me to different parts of our country for trainings in storytelling and nonprofit fundraising. Because I had built a nonprofit. So now I was working in development for this bigger nonprofit too. And so I was flying to Seattle, Washington, and then I was flying to California. And so when I flew to Washington, I was like, you know what? I'm going to start putting the zip codes in of these places I'm going to and going out on dates with guys or just messaging with them because I want to
Yes. Love
practice
it.
believing that the whole world is at my fingertips, that I am not stuck with just what's in my small town in Virginia. So I did this when I flew to Seattle in early October 2019 and didn't meet up with anybody, but had some great chats, some really sexy sexting. I mean, it was just like hot and also invigorating to say, there's cool people everywhere. Like,
Yes.
remember, Lauren, that anything is possible. Anything. So I was like, well, that was really handy dandy. How about I do that again when I'm going to San Diego at the end of October 2019? So I hop on the apps, I put the zip code in. For some reason, the algorithm did something and extended the radius. You know how you can put the area that you're in real wide. Real wide. So I'm scrolling through my phone as one does on the apps and, liking people doing whatever. And I see this really attractive man with this headshot with this, these like piercing blue eyes looking at the screen. And I was like, So I
Ooh,
kind of like just
hello.
liked his profile. I did nothing. I didn't message anything. It was more so to bookmark. Okay, I'll come back to this. So a couple days later, I get a message from this gentleman and he goes, Lauren Love.
From the bookmark.
From the bookmark. He goes, Lauren Love, state your business. Why are you liking my profile all the way in Virginia?
Ooh,
hmm
hello.
hmm And so I respond just as cheekily and I say, well, I'm traveling to California for business at the end of the month and I like to keep my options open. And so he was so cute and messaged back, okay, fair enough. Here's my number. Give me a call and we can talk. And so I immediately sent him a text and he immediately called me and I
We
was
love
putting my daughter
that.
to bed. Right. We love a clear and concise communicator, but I giggled and I declined his call and sent him a text and was like, whoa, you're speedy. I can't talk right now. And he said, well, when can you? And I said, 9 p.m. Eastern time. That single mom life. We got to put the baby to bed before we can get all our
Yes.
freak on. And so he calls promptly at 9 p.m. And friends, it was like talking to a friend I had had for 25 years. We were
Yay.
rolling with laughter. We were flirting effortlessly. We were teasing. We were joking. We were sparring. I was like, what is happening? Like, this is so chill. And I come to find out that he lives outside of LA and I'm going to be in San Diego. So we were both laughing. Like, why did the algorithm even feed this to me? And he goes, but I'd be happy to drive down. And he was like, why don't you send me your dates, the times that you could get together for a date? I did that. We decided to do it for the night that I was flying in because I was flying in earlier than the rest of my team. And so I flew into San Diego, California on October 26th, 2019. And this gentleman was at my hotel an hour early. So when I
All
got to my
right.
hotel to check in, I saw him like across the room. And I don't know about anybody else, but the way I travel is I wear all my like heaviest things. Like I wear my chunkiest
Yes.
shoes and my ugliest heavy jeans and my sweater, like
You have to
everything
be
that
comfortable.
when I got to be comfortable, I also don't want to pack it in my suitcase because it'd be heavy. So I have this whole I don't know, myself. So I'm like, oh shit, if that is him, like this is not exactly how I wanted to like meet my date for the night. Oh well. So I'm in line to check in and I text that number and I'm like, hey, is that you? Are you here? And I don't hear back from him. So I'm checking in. I do my check in. I turn around and he's just like planted, standing across the room from me, just direct eye contact. And I'm like, oh,
I
that is
love
him.
that.
Oh, it was so hot.
Yes.
I walk up and I stand there. And Amy, I kid you not, my whole body goes, there he is. It was wild. It was somatic. It was nervous system. We talked for a second. He was like, hi, it's so wonderful to meet you. I say, hello. I'm like, you're early. He's like, I'm early. Take your time. Go get ready. I'll be here. I didn't know if I'd get stuck in traffic, so I wanted to give myself time. No rush at all. And I say, okay, I'll go change. So I go to put my hand like on my suitcase, like the wheelie one, and his hand is already on the suitcase to wheel it to the elevator, like whatever it's called.
Hello.
And my whole hand, like my whole body goes zoom. And I was like, oh my God, what is going on? So we go on our date. Well, I should say, I come back down to the lobby having changed and freshened up and all this kind of stuff. And we're sitting there, he's talking and speaking about being in the taking position and really being a woman by this stage who had gotten to know my pleasure. He's talking and I'm sitting there listening to him and I just interrupt him and I go, may I kiss you? And I just
Yes.
state what I want. And he
Yes.
doesn't answer and he just leans in and gives me the best kiss in the world. So then we gallivant around San Diego for the night and have the best date that felt like, again, being with an old friend who you're just highly erotically attracted to and had the best sex of our lives. And so then the next morning, it was really interesting over breakfast. I could feel my nervous system being like, oh no, I don't want this to end. And his was similar. So we agreed to meet up again after my conference for a couple days. And over that time, we just like literally fell in love. Like it's some
It's amazing.
silly, hilarious rom-com. We were saying I love you on Halloween. It was ridiculous. All of the stuff I would caution everyone against, all projection, all limerence, all the good stuff. So magical. So then he flew across the country, decided to move to my tiny town in Virginia at the top of 2020, and the world shut down. He ended up moving back to California in May of 2020 to be with his community because LA was getting hit really hard and really wanted to be able to support his friends. And through our love story, though, he continually would say these things like, Lauren, you know, you really were able to put your life back together in a really intriguing way. I wonder what it would look like for your next career to consist of helping others do the same. Like, you really should start a business about this. You have read so many fascinating books. And I
Okay.
was like, what? And I was like, I know how I helped myself. I wouldn't ever be able to help another. And he was like, well, I am sure there's some schooling program out there for that. Like, I am sure that there's something. So sure enough, during COVID, during when we were apart, he sent me a text one day that said, hey, how's that sexuality education business going? And I have it screenshotted and I'm so glad. And I said, well, it's not really doing anything. And he was like, you just remember that you can do anything you want to in this world. And so the next day I
Yes.
Googled sexuality education programs, found the Institute for Sexuality Education and Enlightenment, and started the process of enrollment, was accepted, started school in January 2021, and opened my business in January of 2022. Thought then that I'd do much more like workshopy types of things, but I put out all these workshops. Nobody signed up for a single solitary one. Instead, I got people
Workshops are hard.
Instead, I got people messaging me saying, do you work one-on-one? And so that started the one-on-one work that I now do with individuals all around the world. And that led me to about a year and a half of work saying, I want more embodied intimacy and relationship coaching skills, which is how I found the Embody Lab, which is how Amy and I met. And now I do a ton of relational coaching and just keep nerding out and keep learning new modalities and specialties. And the world is my oyster and it's beautiful and wonderful. And yeah, that's how we got here.
Such a
Ah,
beautiful oyster. And like Lauren is such a fucking powerhouse in this space. So I'm sure many of you know her. And if you don't after today, I'm sure you have already mid podcast checked her out and added her and started following her. In Lauren, you also, I've had the opportunity to be in the audience of one of your talks or not talks. How do you define them?
yeah.
Your
So this is
gatherings.
what is so beautiful about, I think, really truly following our pleasure too, is I deeply believe that when we are aligned and standing in our wanting, the stepping stones appear. And
Mhm.
so I have had the opportunity since summer of last year to host these live events that are live sex and relationship coaching. And they are, oh my goodness, my favorite thing on this planet. It is less, let Lauren get up and educate you, more, let's all spend a sacred 2 hours together, feeling validated and normalized in the questions that we have about sex and love and relationships and romance and eroticism and my desires. And they have become literally my favorite thing. And so what Amy is referencing is I have a residency with Soho House and I come up and for their members and then my guests in the audience, I get to do these events month after month. And then it is now just spreading out and I'm getting invited to do them in different ways, shapes and forms. And I couldn't love it more because for me, it feels truly aligned to sit there and respond to questions again from less of a, let me tell you what to do perspective, but more of a let me come alongside you and normalize your experience and invite you to try a couple things, but more than anything, really help individuals reclaim and reaccess what was always theirs to begin with.
Yes, and it is just such a powerful 2 hours. Anybody who has that experience to imbibe anything that Lauren is offering is like so fucking fabulous. And Lauren, before we wrap up, also, part of your journey, and you mentioned this at the beginning, but I kind of want to delve in a little bit because I definitely resonate with this too, is, now you're on stages, you're one-on-one with clients, you're on podcasts, you have your own podcast, you're a frequent flyer on a lot of different podcasts
So
because
many.
yes, yes, which is fabulous. Like
Thank you.
we need more Lauren. And you've embodied like this sexual goddess that you are. And, this origin story of your sexuality and sex experience was in this marriage where it was with somebody who was not wanting to have sex with you, right?
Yes.
And I can understand that because that was my experience too. And I feel like this also doesn't get talked about
No.
enough. So I'm just curious if
Yeah.
you can talk a
Mhm.
little bit about that part of your experience and what that does. I mean, obviously, we've talked about kind of getting out of that, but I just want to give
Yeah.
airspace to that because for listeners who may be out there, and we talk about, desire discrepancies, but this is beyond desire, for
Yes.
situations that are
Yes.
beyond desire discrepancies. If we can just talk about that for a little bit, that would
Yeah,
be great.
no, I'm so glad you brought that forward because, yes, I think desire discrepancies do get tossed out often. They're probably the number one thing that we work on in sexuality spaces is who has the higher libido and the lower libido or the low desire partner versus the high desire partner. There's so many little things thrown out there, but that is assuming one thing. That is assuming that people are inside a relationship container in which both people are identifying in the same orientation. And so when you have
Correct.
something like this, which is a suppressed homosexuality in the case of my ex-husband, what the party in my body is experiencing is the most extreme form of rejection. Talk about something that absolutely erodes one's own self-worth. When you are believing that there is something that you could do to be working on this, that there is something that you could do to support your quote unquote lower desire partner and nothing works. In fact, you're hearing derogatory statements about you. You're hearing that your partner is turned off by you in these ways that I believed as true, my friends. Again, because I had been raised inside a purity culture. I was a virgin on my wedding night. I had no other experience. When
Same
I came
girl.
out in lingerie on our honeymoon, he laughed at me. Truly laughed at me. And so, of course, I never put this on again. I was so deeply embarrassed of my body. There were so many things that, again, because he didn't know this about himself, there were just so many different requirements of what my body needed to do in order to be okay for him. And I was constantly told that like my vaginal muscles weren't tight enough. I was constantly told that he quote unquote couldn't feel anything. I was constantly told, yeah, just not tonight. The amount of nights I cried myself to sleep, I taught myself to masturbate, crying beside my husband in bed, knowing that I was this close to an affair, knowing that I was absolutely on the precipice of literally sleeping with anyone who would show me an iota of attention because I was starved. And the craziest thing was, no, I had never considered that perhaps he was into men. That never even crossed my mind. I did ask him several times if he was having affairs, if there was something else, if it was pornography. He, no, was not a pornography person. I'm sure he is now. Just found his correct form of pornography. But no wonder he was not a pornography person. I think probably the things he'd been exposed to as a young person in a male body were tits, right? And he was probably like, nah, well, like just not
Like, no
turned on by
thanks.
that. No thanks, right? Not his cup of tea. But yeah, it erodes a sense of self. It
Yes.
is truly wild, the deep and silent effects that level of rejection, and please hear me, this is not a libido difference. This was a repulsed by my body sensation. And so I will never forget my first sexual encounter outside of my marriage. I mean, I wept for days with joy that I was attractive to someone. It didn't register with my brain, which is, again, so tragic, but something that I actually do see. Again, when you've had something like this happen and then you go into an educational field, you do a lot of research on this. I'm actually not the only person who has experienced
Right.
this, and it is incredibly detrimental to the self-worth. And so it was a huge piece of the puzzle that I had to work on was reestablishing my self-worth that didn't actually then swing to the other side, right? And become something that I needed a man to provide for me. Didn't
Yes.
become something that I was consistently then looking outside of myself for. And so some of my deep healing work that I did on my own and what I now do with clients is, okay, how do we make sure that this never happens again? Because we need to know that we are worthy of sexual affection and attention and pleasure, and that we are entitled to it. Dr. Laurie Mintz says that we often stay away from that language, entitled to pleasure. And yet, if only I had known, Amy, if only I had said, no, 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 I'm entitled to pleasure, that could have saved us all a lot of harm. And so
Yes.
coming to that understanding for myself was slow and steady. And I wasn't perfect. I really wasn't perfect. I allowed a lot of lovers into my sphere and into my body who did not hold that level of value. And so it was kind of a trial and error learning experience. And that is something I work with a lot of my clients on, that we're not going to be perfect right out of the gates. And that's okay. We get to learn the things we're supposed to learn when we're supposed to
Yes.
learn them, but it's important work.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that trial and error, that's what it is. It's learning, right? It's
Yes.
all part of the education, your sexual education.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that you were able to go into that depth with it. Thank you. Because I definitely resonate with your experience and have a similar journey in that way. And again, if it was my first fully sexual partner that I'm having sex with, and then I didn't have anywhere to turn, and then I did internalize, and I didn't know because I didn't have the scripts, I didn't have that understanding, right? And so it can be so damaging. So I just want for people who are listening out there, if this resonates with you, believe your body, believe yourself. And there is a world of possibility and people out there who are going to love on your body and love you as you are, and allowing yourself that pleasure and giving yourself pleasure, right?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes. Yes.
Everyone knows I love talking about masturbation because it's
Yes.
so, so important
So
in
crucial.
relationship and out of it.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Still remains. And I talk with my clients all the time that, yes, I taught myself to masturbate in bed beside my gay ex-husband. And then my pleasure practice began to grow and blossom and grow and blossom in my season of singleness. And it is still a crucial important part of my sexual experience. It is my responsibility to make sure that I am maintaining my own solo sex practice with myself. That never
Yes.
becomes my now wonderful partner and husband's responsibility. It doesn't. Our partnered sex benefits from my masturbatory practice, and it is important that it always remain mine. And Betty Dodson says that we are the first and best and last lovers to ourselves. And I deeply believe that it keeps me aligned and checked in because, again, I never want to relinquish that power for my sexual flourishing. I can play with another in a sexual space, but it is imperative that I remember that what my therapist first asked, right? Why am I choosing? Why am I choosing? And
Yes.
so being able to remember my own worth, my own value, my own access to my pleasure at all times, that it doesn't belong to someone else. I would not be okay alone. No, I would be. And it is an important ability to continue to be able to stand on my 2 feet and play with my partner in many, many sexual ways, and acknowledge that this remains my responsibility.
Yes. Fucking mic drop moment right there. Lauren, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you for taking us deep and wonderful and juicy and all of the goodness. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
No, I think that you have done such a good job helping us really unpack and validate the experience that I think far more people are having than we are having conversations about. So thank you. I love a juicy, sexy conversation. And these are the bodies, these are the stories with which we are having sex.
Yes.
And this is important pre-contemplation work. This is important. And sometimes it's happening behind the scenes. And oftentimes it is happening in the lives of people who are doing things like listening to podcasts like this. So thank you for the opportunity to share these parts of the story, because no, not many people want to talk about them. So it really is important that you and I had this conversation. I think in all of the, yes, lots of podcast interviews, a lot of people want to talk about how they want to get past that part. they don't want to have the conversations that we had. So thank you for this opportunity. I'm
Yes.
thankful to be here. And yeah, would love to give listeners a way to get in touch with me if they would like to. But yeah, I just am so thankful for this conversation.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, let us know. We'll definitely link your information in
Yeah.
the show notes, but where can people find you?
Yeah. The easiest way is to go to sexedforyou.com/connect. Everything is spelled out completely. It's not like the number 4 or you, just the letter. It's sexedforyou, all written out. .com/connect. That's going to lead you to my website, but also ways that you can subscribe to the partnership podcast. You can request a free 15-minute consult. You can follow me on Instagram, all that stuff. If you don't want to do that, you can go straight to Instagram. You can go to sex_ed_for_you. Sometimes you can type in sex ed for you and it'll find me. Sometimes it shadow bans me because this is the world that we live in. So if you type in on Instagram, sex_ed_for_you, you will see my smiling face. And I would love to connect with you. Please tell me you found me on Amy's podcast so that I can be like, yay, and I can tell Amy. But
Yeah.
I would love to connect with you. And yeah, 15-minute consults, if something I said today really resonated, are a completely non-obligation. We can just talk about your story, how I work with clients, and next steps if you're interested. But I'm always happy to just connect people to resources as well. So thank you. Thank you for having me, my friend.
Yes. Lauren, are you ready to come to completion?
I'm so ready.
Yes. All right. Blowing things up is.
Sexy.
Yes. So sexy. Okay. Becoming deeply alive and thriving looks like.
Choosing yourself every day.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Reopening access to pleasure and joy is.
Hard but worthy work.
Yes. Yes. Moving beyond the quiet pain looks like. Or maybe moving through the quiet pain looks
Oh,
like.
moving through the quiet pain looks like freedom.
Yes. Yes. And becoming a sexual badass is.
Fun, liberating, and empowering.
Yes. And available to everybody out there.
Yes. So accessible. And one of my greatest frustrations in any type of space is when we start to make it the gate capped. No. My friends, you can do this all on your own. You're able. I did this on the floor of a basement apartment with a rat dying in the wall. This was before any of this stuff. You can do this. This is so accessible. Yeah. You don't need to work with me. You don't need to work with anyone. You can do this on your own. You are able.
And you can work with us. And yeah.
Totally.
You're worthy. You're fabulous. We love you. Lauren, thank you so much. Everyone at home, thank you for listening in. I want to hear from you. Lauren wants to hear from you. Let us know in the comments what you are taking away today. As always, remember to masturbate, lubricate, and get it. Thank you for coming. Please come again, and come again. Yes.
That's all for today, lover. Remember to masturbate, lubricate, and get ate. If you liked this episode, share with a friend, like, subscribe, and as always, thank you for coming. Please come again, and come again.